Welcome, folks. My name is Jack Campbell from OpFocus. Welcome to this webinar that we're doing around post-merger acquisitions, something in the Salesforce world we call org merges. My role here at OpFocus, sort of have a dual role here. I manage our relationships between private equity, many of whom invest in some of the companies that you all work at. I am also a salesperson, so this topic that we're discussing today is something that I am somewhat on the front lines of in my day-to-day discussions with our prospects and customers. Over the last, let's call it 2 or 3 years, we've noticed a significant uptick in M&A activity, and from a downstream perspective, how that impacts how companies are merging users, processes, systems into one sort of core tech stack and go forward, go-to-market plan. Because we've seen this significant uptick, it's really impacted a lot of our solutioning and sort of how we go to market with some of the products that we are then selling and implementing within our customer base. So as sort of a just way to share our knowledge, we've put together a great panel for you. We've got Susan Whittemore, who is, I believe, a past customer of OpFocus. She's head of revenue operations at TeamPay, as well as Jim Parker, who is on our SaaS growth advisory team here at OpFocus. Jim is a senior growth advisor, I believe a 3-time OpFocus customer before he decided to come to the dark side of consulting. So I will let them introduce themselves, but I'll be acting as MC. So excited to listen along with you folks and to help answer any questions that you've got.
All right, great. Thanks, Jack. I'll kick things off. So I'll make this quick because we have a lot of topics to discuss today, but I've been in operations now for roughly 20 years, which pains me to say as those years climb. But yeah, lots of lessons learned here. I, in operations, kind of lived through the pivot between traditional sales ops, business ops, and now into this world of revenue ops that we're all feeling. And experienced public, private companies, different funding sizes, revenue sizes. And so kind of seeing the breadth and depth. I would say it all boils down to really understanding that customer life cycle. It doesn't really matter what size you are. If you're in ops, you need to know. And yeah, super passionate about this topic and everything operations.
Super. Thanks, Susan. Hello, everybody. I wish that we could see your faces. That's one of the downsides of using the webinar structure is that we can't see you, but we hope that you'll use the chat today. And if you have questions that we're not covering, feel free to put them there, and Kyle or Jack will bring those up. But we'll try to leave a little bit of time at the end of the call. Jim Parker, been working with OpFocus for about 5.5 years, and prior to that, as Jack mentioned, led revenue operations, sales and marketing operations for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, something like that. And was a 2-time customer of OpFocus as well. I've been both on the the acquired side and the acquiring side of various business transactions, and then have helped, I don't know, a dozen companies, maybe more through integrations. So looking forward to a really jam-packed conversation today. And I think we're going to start with a quick poll. So Kyle is going to pull up, I think, 4 poll questions. We just want to get a little bit of a feel for you guys and what your situation is, what your current involvement is with integrations or a merger. And so, Kyle, if you can put those up on the screen, that would be great. We'll give you about 30 seconds maybe to answer each question, and then we'll move on to the next one. So the first one, what's the size of your current company by ARR? Just pick one of those.
All right, we'll give everyone 5 or 10 more seconds here.
Okay, cool. All right, so a lot in the 100 to 250, and then a good grouping at the sort of 5 to 50 as well. So, okay, super. Good variety of company sizes by ARR. Great. Okay, next question, Kyle. How many integrations have you been involved with? Or with. Just pretend like that says with. So how many of you have been in some way involved with? And just for definition purposes, whether that means you've been intimately involved or peripherally involved, include everything here. And we're talking about here the combining of multiple businesses, multiple companies. Okay. Oh, wow. We got quite a few who've been involved.
Good crew.
Yeah, fantastic.
I have a feeling they could be teaching us something.
Yeah, exactly. Turn the mics on and let you guys share. Cool. All right. Next question. Where are you? If you are in a integration process today, where are you? So not involved in one all the way through. Yeah, we've just completed one, or we are have completed.
And this is multi-select if you are involved in one now and foresee one down the line as well.
Yeah. Several of our clients have multiple acquisitions going on at the same time, which is exciting. Okay, so about 20% of you just coming out, a third of you in the middle of one right now, and about a fourth, something in the next 3 months. Okay, great. Very pertinent topic then for you guys. All right, and last question. What is your role in the integration process?
Probably could have made this multi-select too, but
Yeah. Just pick the one that's closest to
that's right.
most of your responsibility.
Could have been phrased, how many hats do you actually wear in the process?
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Great.
Super. Lots of SMEs, contributors, technical contributors, some business folks, PMs, and okay, some senior folks as well. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that information with us. That helps us kind of understand a little bit better who we're talking with today. And as Susan mentioned, we started out with like the top 5 pitfalls. And as we started talking about our experiences and sharing stories, that grew to 10. So we're going to try to move fast and still leave some time open for Q&A at the end. So Susan, do you want to take the very first pitfall?
I will, sure. And just for some background for folks. So interesting, early in my career, I met Jim at Novell. And so we have actually worked together through various organizations, and both ourselves have lived through these integrations together. Which you can imagine made for some really fun prep calls. But when I originally met him, he was on the finance side, I'm on ops. And so we had a really nice blend. And so I would say, as you look around your organizations, having those two parties connected is super important. That synergy, I think, made one a little bit more fun, but balanced both our perspectives. And so the first one is kind of talking about the human factors in integrations, and lots of pitfalls that I have actually, oh, I'm seeing a chat here. Oh, okay. Sorry, Kyle. Lots of pitfalls that I've learned about this, but really underestimating the amount of change required when blending companies, whether or not you are the acquired party or whether or not you are making the acquisition. So some things that I've learned in this realm is don't underestimate it. First, be human if you can. Find the least common denominator of the parties involved and try to build relationships in that. Individuals coming into an acquisition, I think logically we know this to be true, but there's lots of fears. There's probably relationships that are built within the company that you're acquiring that, you know, they're really tight, but maybe didn't make it into the due diligence, so you don't know about them. So ways that, you know, I've hedged against this is really stepping back and having conversations with the individual parties that you're acquiring. Some areas that I've lived through. So I've been a part of 4 acquisitions, being the acquired party, and I've been the one that's had to walk the former executive team out one door and then welcome the new executive team in the other. And it's a very awkward place to be. And you really don't know where you should put your loyalty. So these are the things that are kind of in the employees' minds, regardless of title and rank. Lessons that I've learned from that is, for me anyways, open communication is best. I think coming out of probably our 4th integration, I paused for a moment and literally did research in change management to really understand the human factors of change. And it all starts with emotion. Like, the amygdala is there. We all have one. So if you don't start with the understanding of where they are, or have some level of empathy to engage them, you're blocked immediately. So, you know, figure out in the integration plan, how do you understand what's happening to them? How do you address uncertainty? Chuck your egos in the back seat. I know it's hard, but these are individuals that you will most likely want to participate and help you identify where the internal pitfalls are, but also where are those really good things that the company's doing, whether it be in a system or in a manual process. And you're going to need their engagement.
Yeah, I mean, it's mergers can be exciting times, right? But also really stressful times on a lot of people. And your points there, Susan, so important about showing kindness, showing appreciation, being honest, being transparent, makes it so much easier for everybody through that process. There's been some really positive experiences and some really not so pleasant experiences. And really is about, I love what you said there, really about like taking the human factor into consideration. How do we want our employees, regardless of how they're going to be impacted by the integration, to feel about this process? So
yeah, and I always say there's a cost to it. It may not show up on the balance sheet as a line item, but there is a cost to that friction at the very beginning. And so if you can find any way to smooth out that friction and get that engagement, you're setting yourself up very early on for some higher element of success.
Amen. All right, should we go to number 2?
All right.
Okay, so the next one is somewhat related to it, and that is another pitfall can be a lack of sort of shared clarity across the organization around the reason for the merger, right? And there can be a lot of different motivations. Maybe it's we're trying to increase our market share. Maybe we're trying to broaden the product portfolio and address some needs. Maybe we're trying to cross-sell and we're just really trying to acquire additional potential customers. Maybe there's economies of scale involved and we're trying to do more at the same or less cost. Or we've seen quite a few times where companies, maybe traditional software companies, are acquiring a SaaS business to try to incorporate a new licensing model right into their portfolio. So whatever the purposes are, the key is to make sure that everybody on the team that's involved with making the integration successful knows and understands what those intentions are, because those intentions should provide the underpinnings for a bunch of really critical decisions that have to be made. And an integration, a merger followed by an integration, is full of decisions to be made, right? Everything from people to processes to technologies, to organizations, et cetera. And as long as everybody knows, right, where we're going and why, it makes those decisions much easier, and it helps to ensure that we maintain sort of a very clean alignment to those goals. And I think probably a lot of this is not rocket science, but I think oftentimes all of the activity, the pre-merger activity, is fairly secret, right? There's not a lot of people involved with it. Maybe some key decisions are being made there, and then the transaction happens, and now a whole bunch of other people on the team now need to find out about it. And sometimes we miss the step of communicating, right, at that juncture, why we're doing this. So the first recommendation there for you, there, a solution there, is just like communicate and keep communicating. Make sure everybody on the team really understands the purposes. Be very transparent as much as you possibly can about that. We'd also really recommend that you have an integration, some sort of an integration charter, right? A documented charter of the reasons why and the goals and the purposes of it, and that you refer back to that charter frequently during key decision-making moments to say, are we staying true to our purposes here? And when priorities have to be made and there are trade-offs that have to be made, use those original intentions to help guide those decisions. So anything, Susan, you want to add there?
Yeah, well, clarity is like my number one driver. Some people get tired of me asking, but I will continue asking until I get the clarity I need, so we know where we're heading and how fast we have to get there. But without it, again, not going too much into the human side of it, but there's interference, right? There's drag, there's friction. And with that clarity, just like you were saying, if you really understand the intent of the merger and what are those success criteria, what is the board going to hold us to, we can quickly go through our list, which anyone who's been in integrations knows is a mile long, and say, hey, this is critical, this is urgent, this is the nice to have. And as we go through that discovery, we will learn things within new orgs where they weren't discoverable during due diligence. And we're going to need to know very quickly, how do we move this in? And again, how critical and urgent is it to that North Star, to the KPIs that were measured against? So I think that hits it. I mean, I keep going back to when we were at Rocket, and we acquired our first SaaS business. And we had our integration playbook. We took this, we plugged it into the ecosystem, we were good. And it was a completely different go-to-market model. Yeah. There was no way we could plug it. And so having that confidence to say, time out, like different motion. So the playbook changes. Yeah.
I love Rhiann Hansen put a note in the chat about this one, saying, if the team doesn't know what the purposes are, they're going to create their own reasons, right? Which just leads to bad decision making, right? And confusion and so forth. So
yes, the assumptions, and that's where you get festering, right? So you have to kind of reduce that so you can keep moving forward. It's a good one.
Okay, cool. All right. So number three pitfall is a lack of really adequate discovery around, and we're not talking about due diligence discovery, but assuming this is sort of post transaction, there's oftentimes a lack of adequate discovery around what's really going to be involved in bringing these two businesses together, which basically leads to underestimating the amount of work that's involved with a merger. And it's human nature to be like, oh, this isn't going to be too hard, right? This is going to be easy. Our businesses are very similar, or the business that we're acquiring is pretty small, or whatever the case may be. It's easy to underestimate, particularly from a leadership standpoint. It's easy to underestimate the amount of work that actually has to go into to making this happen. And as we mentioned, right, there's impacts across the board. There's impacts to customers, to contracts, to reporting, to systems, to processes, to obviously people, and so forth. And we need to be thinking about, so what does this mean? Here's a few areas to think about as you sort of consider areas where you need to dig a little bit deeper in order to really get a handle on how much work is involved. So your go-to-market models, you just mentioned that a minute ago, Susan. What about existing customers? What about renewals and contractual obligations that we have? How are we going to deal with those? What about our licensing, models? What about, changes that we may want to make as we bring the two businesses together? How about the product catalogs, right? How are we going to enable both sales teams to sell each other's products, if that's part of the solution? What about data migration, right? How are we going to move and combine data sets between the two organizations? How about business processes? What are we going to, how are we going to, and we'll spend a little more time on this in just a minute, but how are we going to bring together two potentially very disparate business processes across the go-to-market process and financial process and so forth? And then, of course, the topic that's near and dear to OpFocus's heart is what about the systems, right? And the tech stack and interoperability and integrations and so forth. So one thing that we found very helpful as far as really understanding and assessing the sort of the size and the effort involved is to as soon as you can get the various teams from both acquired and acquiring businesses together to really begin doing some exploratory work. So having some dialogues around, here's a day in the life of our salespeople. Here's a day in the life of our salespeople, right? And kind of compare notes. What about how do your BDRs function? What does your lead life cycle look like? What does your quoting process look like? Let's compare contracts and really spend some good time learning about the other side's way of doing business before you try to finalize a plan to go and bring the two companies together. Susan, looks like you want to say something. Go for it.
Gosh, I always want to say something, Jim. You're absolutely right. And I would say the best success that we've had is not just in building the rapport and discoveries in the day in life and the leadership team from the people who are involved in the integration. That's going, that's where you start. And that's really important. But really listen to what the other parties are saying and try to figure out who are those key players, who are the individuals that they keep mentioning manage this process or that process. Is it Joe Schmo over here and he's got something that's going on? Find out these key individuals in the organization and build a relationship with them, because more than not, they are the people that maybe people are looking to. Maybe they have some manual craft that they're doing in the organization, but you want to find out where your influencers are in building this plan, but also later in rolling out whatever the net new thing will be, that model, that adoption. At the same time, we tend to stay away from the detractors. Maybe it's a noisy salesperson. Maybe it's a really loud marketer and they're just, arm's distance away. Figure out how to break into it. We've had great examples, well, painful examples, Jim, of, rolling out and iterating on sales processes, kind of merging many brands into one sales process. And we spent hours looking at the plan, building the sales process, engaging, launching, only to hear the noise bubble from inside, all the way up to leadership. And we really couldn't figure out what was the actual cause. And when we figure out who the detractors were and sat with them quietly and helped them to understand our perspective, but also to hear their perspective, it was so interesting. They became the #1 partner to every change motion we had. Every sales rollout, new implementation, playbook, they were right there, and they were a force multiplier in building it.
Yeah, well, you did a great job of turning many of those detractors into champions and advocates. So
The
one of your
trampoline I brought into the office.
one of your gifts. So yeah, so I think the key takeaways here are, don't underestimate, right? Build into your integration plan at sufficient time for the teams to understand each other and their business processes, and to really understand all viewpoints, including those detractors, like you said, Susan. So they have a really important viewpoint to share. Okay, you want to take number? Are we on number 4? I think we're on number 4.
Playbooks. Everybody wants them. They all say they have them. Nobody has enough time to build them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'd say, I'm going to be honest with everyone here. I would love to have a playbook for each one of my functions leading RevOps. It is like literally, I will get there someday. I will work in an organization where we finish the marketing playbook, the sales playbook, the CS playbook. Until then, there's pieces of them built, and we call them living documents. I'm willing to bet most organizations are feeling the same way. So when you go through due diligence, you're ultimately given what they've learned. They've learned what their sales motion is, their go-to-market motion, where their ICP is. More than not, that is maybe a half truth of what reality is, close to it. So really, again, it goes back to most things that we're talking about, but assess it out for yourself. Figure out, what does that new playbook look like, and start there. And, having playbooks, having frameworks, for me, that's the way my brain works. I've learned I can move faster. It doesn't mean that the frameworks I use, I can force into every organization. So there's different flavors of it. There's a change management framework. If you don't have one, get one. Hire someone that can help you with that framework. And then you have your integration plan, and you have to figure out these different go-to-market motions. So start understanding the change aspect of it, and teach others. If you have a larger scale integration team and each one is taking a function, whoever is involved in the change aspect, make sure they're sitting at the same seat or virtually in the same Zoom room with those leaders, and play devil's advocate. Have we thought about this? Have we thought about that? And build those playbooks. So for me, I think it allows the confidence in the team to know what direction we're heading. And again, as we get into the systems and the data integration, it allows us to make better decisions and quicker decisions on what we're going to give, merge, buy, or then ultimately rip out of the org, and the timelines around it. So don't force it into one, just organically figure out what works for the business. Trying to think if there was any other tidbits that we've learned about the playbook. I mean, it all goes back to the customer journey, right?
Yeah, I think that's key.
Really, I think there's enough, and I've seen the attendee list. We got a good audience here. They could probably teach me a thing or two about the customer journey, but you have what you are and you have what you acquired. Figure out those points of commonality, and then where there isn't anything defined, spend the time and figure out what works best.
Yeah, those playbooks become really helpful, particularly if part of the strategy for your company is growth through acquisition. It's really important not to be reinventing the wheel every single time. And it brings, like you said, it's sort of a level of both confidence and speed, I think, to the team to know, hey, here's how we do things, right? Here's the things that we need to be thinking about and asking about and making decisions around, and having some of those frameworks so helpful to moving the process forward more quickly. But I love what you said about flexibility, right? Like every acquired company is going to look a little different, right? And the the attributes of that company will help define what specific steps to be taken. But a playbook certainly does help kind of streamline the process, smooth the process.
Yeah, in my experience, it helps normalize the language we use.
Yeah.
And also, depending on where you are in your business, you may be acquiring different departments at different skill levels, capabilities. And so again, it's a blended family you're trying to create. And if you don't normalize the language and the definitions of how you refer to things, there could be a lot of assumptions.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Number 5, I'm just looking at the clock here.
We gotta speed things up.
We'll pick up the pace a little bit here. So such good material. So number 5, do you want to take number 5, Susan?
Sure. So number 5 really goes into the playbooks, right? So understand the details of the integration plan, the timeline. So again, going back up for clarity, going back up to at what point and where did the board management team commit to certain things? You have to start where the commits are and then kind of build down. So the way that I look at it is, hey, I may not have been responsible or had the authority to commit to X deadline that we will launch comp plans and everyone is going to be kind of comped on all of the products, right? I need to know that because there's so much more that happens before. So you're really backing into these deadlines. And from there, now we can actually start to get creative, because if we know that the sales team is going to be fully integrated by X date, because we have to start the next year's planning and their comp plans, etc. Now I can back up to it and go, okay, who needs to learn what skills? Like, do we actually have a skills matrix of the sales team? Do we know where they're, do we know the different motions? Is there enablement that we have to make sure that they have to have by a certain date? And this is cross-functional, the same thing with customers. So if we're going to go to market with a cross-sell, say the North Star for the merger was we wanted a customer list. Whatever company we just bought, their customers were amazing. We want to kind of extend in that way. Okay, so now like the focus of that integration plan is how to retain those customers. What does that experience look like? And if you have solutions that overlap, what's that talk track? Where are the renewals that are coming up? And have you kind of ranked your customer list to like, hey, these are like the white glove customers, we can't lose them, so forth. So Jim, I could talk about this for hours, really in the detail, but you have to start with what are those North Star deadlines, the ones you can't change, and then using the clarity of the goals back into how that plan will be built. And if you're actually leading the integration and building this plan, I mean, there's a lot of flexing that has to happen. You can be way down in the weeds and the minutia, but you still have to keep that strategy. So ensure that the skills that you're building around you and the experience of the people at the table are having that shared vision and can flex in that way. And if they can't, you're going to have to do some teaching along the way as well of why it's important.
Yeah, that's critical. I mean, it's rare that I've seen an integration go well where it's been done sort of ad hoc, right?
Yeah.
Or sort of fly by the seat of your pants. It really requires, it's a project, right? It's a project like any other project that requires adequate resourcing and scoping, like you were saying. It requires people that have some dedicated focus and time to it, and you need a detailed plan that's based on those sort of board level commitments, but lots of other deadlines, right? So important to have. It probably goes without saying, but you need somebody to basically be your project manager for the integration activities that are happening post transaction, that is working to a very structured timeline with tasks, with deadlines, and with resources associated to them. And maybe this pitfall goes back to the one that we mentioned earlier, which is like underestimating the amount of work. Make sure that as you build your integration, your detailed integration plan, that you're building in adequate time. Be conservative in your approach, because most of the people on the team are likely keeping your lights on as well, right? They have their normal day jobs, and they're being asked to try to onboard a new business. So.
Yeah, and Jim, it's an interesting thing, because when we go through an acquisition, of course, you'll have visibility to kind of who's on retention plans, who are the talent within an org. But once you get that integration plan, find the other people that can help you make those deadlines easier, right? I love working with generalists. I'm telling you, I scope them out in every organization I'm in, because their skill set is broad. They're anxious to learn. Have them go and work on finding deadlines to things that are important. Where are the contract expiry dates? This, that, right? So kind of run things in batches, but depending on your culture of your organization, I seek out these generalists, even if they may not have a title of being involved in the integration. They're usually really eager to help.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, the next one, I think maybe Kyle, you can post the next one in the chat. This is really, but I don't think we'll spend much time on it because we've kind of covered it already. But the sort of the pitfall of failure to understand the business process flow from both sides, I think we touched on that adequately. And there is a webinar, another webinar that we did, I don't know, a year ago, several months ago, where we talk about some tools to help in that analysis, sort of. How does each business do things today, and which business process, which tool is sort of more mature, better adopted, more automated, and which should we keep going forward, or should we craft an entirely different business process as we sort of move forward. So I'd just point you maybe to that video as well for some tips and hints there. And if you'd like a template for how to really do a deep side-by-side business process and technology comparison, we can send you a helpful template for that as well.
Cool.
So 7, do you want to take number 7, Susan?
Yeah, this is kind of just another segue into business process, but and it kind of goes back to the frameworks. Really find out who can provide you a data dictionary if it exists. That's number 1. 2, if it doesn't exist, spend the time and define it before you start any integration. So it goes back to these frameworks, goes back to really understanding the customer journey and what does that look like. But when you get to the point where now you're staring at 2 systems, whether it be ERPs, Salesforce, CRMs, whatever it is, make sure you're talking apples to apples. And again, linking back to that North Star, what is the intention for the merger? Because this is going to give you that time to decide, are we in a position today to run separate systems in tandem for X period of time? Or is there urgency that we need to migrate and consolidate these systems? Those are 2 very different paths. And I think naturally, because we are driven in integrations to want everybody to work on the same system, we initially go down that path. But without the time in order to do that correctly, you will certainly feel those growing pains. If you rush through the integrations on a data side, it's like scaling and building on potentially a shaky foundation. So understand the impact that may have. Some areas that I think today, are more readily available or even discussed as options versus where they were maybe 5 or 10 years ago, is seriously discuss if maybe building new is a better idea. So you can keep the parties on 2 separate systems for X period of time, Well, you have another group of people that are building the future. Whatever that future state looks like, they can have the conversation and they're not working in the live users environment. And then you can go through that change. I think maybe 10 years ago when we would push this, it was like a blank stare, like there's no way, there's so much cost to it. I think nowadays we're realizing that we are so heavily tech first and our organizations are so intimately connected in our tech stacks that maybe there is a better use case for understanding or for migrating to a brand new system versus going through the pain of unraveling and then building it together. And then the assessments. I mean, there's risk to revenue. I have seen the brand reputation of customers getting multiple Marketo blasts because someone forgot to filter out this and now there's confusion. So there's, there's risks to your brand. There's risks to creating noise in the community. There's risks internally when something goes awry, because at that point, whatever group is probably feeling a bit of like embarrassment, whatever. And so they're like, well, this damn integration, if this wasn't here, it would be fine. So there's value and there's cost to all of these things. But even simply, I mean, we lived through this too when we migrated to an ERP in an environment where then we were acquiring companies multiple times a year. The more sophistication you put into a company, if your model is to acquire, it's going to make it harder because you're integrating into something that is custom built. So lots of things to consider there, but it really goes back to the North Star. What's your timeline? Do you have the ability to start fresh and take into consideration mostly the impact to the customer, which will then have an impact to you?
Yeah, it's, I mean, there are pros and cons to like allowing the businesses to run sort of independent, right? Versus bringing them together. But it's pretty rare, particularly in SaaS, that one of the purposes for the integration wasn't to sort of leverage some sort of synergy, right? And to get sort of, 1 + 1 = 3. And I think what we see more often than not is people get that, right? And to your point, like that is typically one of the objectives of the merger. But instead of taking the time to sort of thoughtfully bring business process and technology and people together and do so in sort of a rational way, we just like tack it on, right?
Yeah.
We just slam the two, business processes or systems together. And now we've got confused customers because, like you said, maybe they're getting an email from Marketo and they're getting something else from HubSpot, or we have two different processes for giving support to our customers. Or we've got, sort of swivel chair integration going on. Manual processes suddenly start to creep in. We have a bloated tech stack, right? We're paying for redundant tools. The integration between tools is not good. So I think the point with this pitfall is just like take the time to thoughtfully bring the two business processes and technologies together. And if that means bringing a partner on board who's done this lots of times to help you through that, then do that. But avoid the temptation to just move so fast that you're just creating basically rework in the future and a lot of confusion, in the meantime.
Yeah, and all of these points are correlated. Like I remember I was at a private company and we were acquired by private equity. And their renewals for their organization were very transactional. The private company I was with, very much not. It was literally building business cases for every renewal. And there was a lack of empathy there. They were like, nope, we're going to move it to here. And you can't help but try to tell them what you've learned over the years, but when someone's kind of locked on, we're shifting, they're not going to listen. And at some point, the acquired party is like, hey, I tried to tell you. So there are some lessons learned there. Everything is there's a driver to business in any which way, but if a process that you want to run is going to ultimately impact the customer service and the customer success and all of your projections, like, in my opinion, it's worth pausing and going, okay, we better look at this a little bit further.
Yeah, amen. And number 8 is really sort of it's a 7.1 or something,
Yeah.
Which is really about data. And this gets a little more this is a little more tactical, but fundamentally impacts your ability to execute on your strategy. And this particular failure is sort of trying to take shortcuts around your customer data and bringing those data sets together. So it's really a failure to take the time to analyze, to dedupe, to merge, and to enrich your customer data before you combine it, right? So there's a temptation to say, hey, we got to move so fast and we need people cross-selling right away and we need to share customer lists. Let's just put it in the system and we're going to fix it later. And inevitably, that leads to a slowdown in all of those objectives that you have, cross-selling and so forth, that it doesn't pay off to do so. And with just a little bit of help and some automation tools and some expertise from people who have done this numerous times, you really can fairly quickly do that analysis of data sets, looking for things like duplicate customers, duplicate contacts, et cetera. Do an analysis of the fields, right, on your various objects in Salesforce or other CRM tools. Like, how are we capturing information about our customers, in this business versus this business, making sure that you have shared definitions, right? What does customer type mean to you versus what does customer type mean to you, right? And bringing those together, then going through a deduping process, and then asking yourself, what information do we not have that we really need to have in order to be successful and to accelerate the business going forward? Because we may want to enrich some of that data as part of this overall process, so that we come out with a better, more complete data set than either one of the individual data sets going in. Anything you want to add to that one, Susan?
Hire someone.
Great point.
After hours and hours and way too much coffee and long nights, I will tell you, if you can, if the business supports it, still go through the discovery. I wholeheartedly believe the people in the integration need to understand those points of discovery and frameworks. But when all of that is said and done, get the data right. And if you don't have bandwidth to do it, hire someone to do it in tandem while you're working on everything else.
That's a great point. And it's both sides of that, right? You need someone inside the company whose job it is to really understand the data from a business standpoint, right? So make it someone's job on the internal integration team to really lead and own understanding the data, building a data dictionary, doing the compares and so forth, and then bring in a partner or whoever who can help you with some of that to accelerate the process of that analysis, because it's a world of difference whether you're doing it manually on your own or with a team.
Well, and we're all so busy. It's the thing that always falls to the end of the night. Oh, I'll just get to this when everybody's at home. I guess we're all mostly at home these days. But anyway, so yeah, make sure it gets done. And I know we're coming up to time here, so I'm going to hit on almost the last one. But training, preparing and training. This one is dear to my heart, as you can imagine. So going back to those detractors, pull them in. Hopefully they've been along the journey with you in various different areas of your discovery. But again, find those individuals who are your promoters, that have the voice, they really have the hearts and mind in that company that you acquired. Every company has some of them. Find the detractors and bring them in early and really give them the role of having the voice. So one of my tenets is I can train all day. I can run enablement teams. It does not matter what comes out of my mouth. I've never seen enablement be adopted as fast as putting a user in that role or that role to then educate their team, whether it be find those sales individuals who are really good at something, whether it be discovery or prospecting or what, and make them in it, put them in the seat and have them train others. There's an appreciation when we have like-minded individuals showing us something new. So involve them. And remember, like all of training and development is really change management. So starting with, hey, this is what we did, appreciate that. Here's the awareness of what the change is, North Star. Figure out, do they even, like, I hate the saying, but are they on the bus or off? Like, have a gut feeling about that because it will change your tack. And then bring the knowledge in. And don't forget to kind of go back and you have to reinforce it. Is it happening? Did I learn something new as the person who designed the process? Then I need to iterate. Make sure you circle back for that feedback and make it consumable. Small chunks, especially today. I mean, lack of attention span that is happening right now, and we're all on Zoom and it's really busy. So if you can adopt that agile motion of change, I wholeheartedly support that. And I think for the most part, if you can make it as informal as you can, I think informality wins when it comes to change management versus formal. Some areas that have been unique in my career that I have found been game changers. If we think about going back to a common language, we did this at Rocket Gym. We had 24 disparate brands. We came in as like the first ops function to make them cross-sell. Yeah, that was fun. Great people. Massive resistance, different languages. So we brought in predictive index and we said, you know what, we're going to learn about each other because, hey, we're common at being a human being. So let's figure out how introverted we are, how extroverted we are. Let's have this. And we did it in a fun way, but you could tell coming out of that, there was like an openness. And when we fell back to these points of friction, we had something to kind of lean on.
Yeah.
Here's what they didn't know. I was taking all of those understandings of how they learned, and I was building enablement programs based on how they learned. Are they more extroverted? So they're going to do great in a group session. Are they more introverted and they need that one-on-one? Do they need a high level of autonomy? Do they not? All of these things, if you have the ability to bring them in, allows for you to really quickly customize your training and get that gain and adoption.
Awesome. Okay, I'll do number 10 in about 30 or 45.
Wrap her up.
And that is, and this is a bit of tongue in cheek, but it's real, and it's particularly a particular call out for our friends in operations, IT, finance, the people on the front line who are having to deal with integration. And pitfall number 10 is expecting praise. Don't expect praise.
That's right.
It's a hard job, and just know that you and your team, you are heroes, whether or not anybody sees and recognizes the work that you're doing. And then just a recommendation along those lines to the senior leaders that are on this call today, and that is take time to reward, to acknowledge, to express appreciation to the teams that are doing the really hard work of an integration, because it is hard work. And take the time to pause, to thank, to ensure that they have, that their needs are being met, and to ask, like, what could we have done better, right? What's going well and what can we do better? So that each time you go through this process, things are a little less taxing on the team. So anyway, with that, that's our top 10 list. And Jack, turn it over to you, back over to you.
Take it away. Appreciate everyone joining us on a Thursday afternoon. Hopefully everyone is able to take some nice things away from this. I believe we'll probably make a recording available that will be referenceable in the future. I think Kyle will probably follow up with an email with all you folks on that. If you have any other further questions, do not hesitate to reach out. I think everyone has my email address and knows about OpFocus at this point. We're more than happy to help you guys navigate through a lot of this stuff. Like I said, this is what we do every day. We've done a couple dozen of these in the past few years, and I think we're pretty good at it now. So more than happy to continue to help you navigate through any acquisitions that you guys are doing from a systems perspective and from a process perspective. Before I let everyone go, quick plug. From just a general admin ownership perspective of Salesforce, our founder, David Carnes, runs regular training dojos. We have upcoming a reports and dashboards workshop. We know how important these can be when reporting to the board, both internally and externally at your business. The reports and dashboards workshop is extremely helpful. We're going to follow up with a link to that as well. It's coming up on June 27th and 28th. Great thing to send your internal admins to. So we are at the top of the hour. Again, appreciate everyone joining. Hope this was helpful, and hope to see you guys soon.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.